Hello, my name is Melissa Wells, and I teach at West Valley Middle School. We are here today because you are going to do your last lesson in weather. The handouts that go along with this lesson can be found in the Student Resources tab on Knox County Schools. The address is www.knoxcountyschools.org. Today we're going to talk about severe weather. But before we do that, we need to take a look back at what you have already learned about weather. This is the fourth in a series of weather lessons. In the first lesson, you talked about air masses and fronts. Remember air masses, all those different places, and then fronts that come in with different symbols. That was your first lesson. The second lesson was on the symbols for fronts. We learned that this is a warm front, and this is a cold front. And this one was an occluded front. And those symbols help you understand how they tie into the different types of fronts that help us learn about weather. The third lesson was on using weather maps. The symbols go on the weather maps and help you and help meteorologists explain what kind of weather we're going to be happening by what kind of front is moving into the area. If a cold front is moving into an area, we're probably going to experience some cold weather, some rain followed by some cold weather. A warm front comes in, a little bit of rain followed by a little warmer weather. So that was what the fronts lesson was about. Today we're going to tie all of this in together and talk about severe weather. So for this lesson, the essential questions are: what are some types of severe weather? How do thunderstorms form and what are their effects? How do tornadoes form and what are their effects? And how do hurricanes form and what are their effects? In East Tennessee, we are most familiar with things like thunderstorms and tornadoes. Those are severe forms of weather that we have experienced. Maybe not tornadoes, but our neighbors close to us have. Perhaps you live in a county where there have been tornadoes. Thunderstorms we have had a lot. We just had some recently, full of boom booms and lightning. Some of them can be very, very frightening. But if you understand how they're formed, maybe it will help a little with your fears. Other forms of severe weather may include hurricanes. Maybe you know somebody that lives along the coastline that has a beach house and they have to prepare for hurricanes. And blizzards, we don't have that much contact with blizzards. People that live up north where the temperatures are cooler, along the Great Lakes, they get blizzards up there. They get lots of cold, moist air that creates blizzard conditions. And cyclones. Cyclones are sort of like tornadoes out in the South Pacific of Indonesia and Asia. They include a whole lot of rain along with the swirling winds. So we're going to take a step back and go back and look at that cold front again. Remember, cold front symbol looks like this one right here. Thunderstorms are often associated with cold fronts because when you have a cold front, the cold front mass of cooler air moves into an area of warmer air. It pushes that warm air up rapidly, and when it does that, the atmosphere becomes unstable and creates clouds and wind. Because of this is why cold fronts are associated with thunderstorms. Here we have a diagram, and in this diagram the blue shows the cold air, the red shows the warm air. The cold air pushing the warm air, creating clouds and thunderstorms. Pushing up, and this big old cloud, this is a cumulonimbus cloud, and they are also associated with thunderstorms. That's why we see these big clouds in the sky when we have thunderstorms. Thunderstorms, how do they form and what are their effects? Well, a thunderstorm is a very violent disturbance in the atmosphere. Way up there in the atmosphere where things go, winds blow. We don't necessarily see it and feel it down here until the storm hits. You need hot air or heat, which is the warm air being pushed up, and you need moisture to form. So you remember back when we talked about hot air rises, cold air sinks, and the warm air rises up, and you think about your water cycle, that cold, when that warm air goes up, it starts to cool off, and it can create moisture, but start forming clouds. And then it involves a sudden change in air pressure too. They're pushing down and not pushing down. Formed within cumulonimbus clouds around a cold front, and they usually have strong rain, strong winds, lightning, and thunder. Thunderstorms can occur year-round and at all hours, but they usually occur in the in the spring and the fall a little bit more frequently because there's a change in temperatures going from cold to hot or hot to cold. Here are some pictures of thunderstorms. You see right here your big clouds, cumulus clouds that we were talking about. Again, here they build from the bottom and build all the way up to the top. They get very, very dark on the bottom, and they carry a lot of moisture. And the thunder, the lightning that accompanies these storms can be very, very dangerous, but sometimes very, very beautiful too. So, how do tornadoes form, and what are their effects? Well, first, exactly what is a tornado? Well, you think about the thunderstorms, what we just talked about. And we talked about when that hot air rises rapidly, the more rapid it goes up, the more volatile that the storm is. That means the more there's more going on in the atmosphere. Well, if it gets really, really pushed up quickly, the thunderstorm gets really, really bad. It can move into tornadoes. A tornado is a destructive rotating column of air with very high winds and a funnel-shaped cloud in contact with the surface of the earth. You have probably seen lots of pictures of tornadoes. Maybe you've seen movies with tornadoes. One of my favorite movies is the picture called Twister. I love that film, and I watch it a lot. But it has tornadoes in it, and you can get a good picture of what the destruction and the power and how they form in these pictures and in movies. You need to see warm, moist air, or you need warm, moist air from the Gulf of Mexico. Remember, that's those air front pushing up from here, going up from the bottom, warm, moist air from the Gulf of Mexico, and cool, dry air, that's the polar region, sending cool, dry air down. Typical steps for the formation of a tornado. A large thunderstorm. I've already said we need a large thunderstorm that occurs in the cumulonimbus cloud. A change in wind direction and wind speed way up there in the high altitude. And it starts to air to swirl this way, which is horizontally. But rising air from the ground pushes up on that swirling air and tips it over. So now it's turning like this. The funnel of swirling air begins to pull up more warm air from the ground. Because remember, warm air rises, and it's pulling that warm air up. The funnel grows longer and stretches towards the ground. When the funnel hits the ground, it becomes a tornado. In our diagram here, we've got here the warm, moist air flows upwards. Low air pressure forms inside the cloud. Then the warm air begins to rotate. And at the same time, it's pushing warm air down. Cold air is going to get cold up here. Over here, we have the cold, dry air coming from Canada, the warm, humid air coming from the Gulf of Mexico. Here's another diagram. This is a good one, better showing the cold air, hot air rising, cold air being pushed down, so it creates this funnel. Here's a picture of that huge cumulonimbus cloud where these storms begin, showing the horizontal rotation before it becomes the vertical rotation. Tornadoes can form most anywhere, but most of the tornadoes in the United States occur in an area called Tornado Alley. Tornado Alley stretches from northern Texas to South Dakota and from Missouri to the Rocky Mountains. When you can see one reason why, we've got an easy path for the warm tropical air coming down this way and the polar cold dry air, polar continental air coming down this way. Tornado Alley has the right condition There's a lot of wind created here. Got warm, dry air here. So you can see here's your cold front and here's your warm front. So the conditions are just right in these areas for tornadoes to occur. We have a lot of tornadoes in the Oklahoma and Kansas area and in the Texas area also. These are some pictures that can show the devastation and destruction that a tornado does. But what is really interesting is you see that these houses over here were totally demolished. You can see a path right here where their trees are all knocked down. And yet these houses down here remain untouched. It's just the power of the wind and the path of the tornado. Here's some more destruction. Our neighbors in Putnam County recently went through this tornado destruction, and they had a lot of homes were destroyed up there. And these are some good pictures showing here's your cumulonimbus cloud, here's your funnel cloud, and here's where it's hitting the ground and just kind of pushing up debris and dust and dirt. And another one over here. As it turns, you can see it gets wider and wider. These things can be almost a mile across at the ground. They're really powerful ones. Okay, now we're going to move on to hurricanes. Hurricanes and how they form and what are their effects. A hurricane is a huge storm. It can be 600 miles across. If you look right here, this is Florida. And over here, we're getting ready to go into the cusp of Texas and move around from Louisiana and down. Hurricanes have strong winds and spiral inward and upward at speeds of 75 to 200 miles per hour. And each hurricane usually lasts for over a week. It starts building and growing for a long time over that warm, moist ocean. Hurricanes can only form over really warm ocean water. It has to be at least 80 degrees or more. And because of that, it usually forms down near the equator. Warm, moist air over the ocean rises rapidly. Remember, it goes up quickly. When it goes up quickly, it's going to create clouds. The warm air is replaced by cooler air. This causes the storm clouds to rise. They will begin to rotate with the rotation and the spin of the earth. If there is enough warm water, the cycle will continue. And the storm clouds and wind speeds will grow, causing a hurricane to form. In this diagram, you can follow and see that here we have the warm water. Has to be at least 80 degrees or above. The winds come and force the air up. The warm air rises. As it gets up in the upper atmosphere, it starts to cool. And then as it cools, the humid air becomes clouds of the storm, condensing and making the clouds. The winds outside the hurricane steer it and help it to grow. Remember I said, here's the equator. These storms start near the equator. So most of them are going to start right here. What also helps is, here is Africa. Africa is a hot continent, and there's some deserts. And a lot of times the desert winds blow off of the continent and out over the ocean that creates that warm air out over that warm water and helps these hurricanes to form. And they move in this direction, and they can go across land here. But these are usually the paths of hurricanes. These are some effects of hurricanes. Hurricanes are very, very damaging and unrelentless storms. They can clear an area very easily, leaving lots of destruction and debris in its path. Over here, this shows it also leaves a lot of flooding of water. There's a lot of rain that comes along with the hurricane, and they leave behind devastation. Homes that are flooded and people can't live in them. They can also move houses, move trees, and move cars. I hope that you have enjoyed this little lesson about severe weather. If you activities that go along with this lesson, I think you will enjoy them. They are fun activities, and several of them are hands-on.